The stainless steel blade flashed in the candlelight, a drunk man's lunge aimed at the heir's throat. It never reached him. Between one heartbeat and the next, the new chef's hand closed around the moving knife. She didn't spill a drop of the soup she was serving. In that frozen second, the entire Kang family saw it. Their hired help was something else entirely. Her name was Ifoma. She arrived at the Kang family's Jeju Island compound 3 days earlier, a private chef hired on a single glowing reference from Lagos. For the reclusive shipping heir Minyi, this dinner was a high-stakes peace offering to his estranged family. For Ifoma, it was just another service, until the knife moved, and her training, a chapter of her life she'd sealed shut, reacted before she could think. 3 years before she ever held a chef's knife, Ifoma Nwasu held a pressure dressing against a femoral artery bleed in a dust-choked village outside Maiduguri. She was a combat medic with the Nigerian Army's 7th Division, and her hands were trained for a different kind of service, to stop life from leaving, not to coax flavor into it. She left the service after a convoy ambush that took her unit's sergeant, a man who had taught her that calm was more vital than any bandage in his kit. The memory of his voice, assess, don't react, was what she packed away, along with her uniform. In Lagos, she reinvented herself through food. Her grandmother's recipes, once a weekend solace, became her new language. She cooked with the same precision she'd used to set a field IV line. Within 2 years, she was the private chef for a telecom executive, her jollof rice and pepper soup whispered about in tight circles. It was there she met Adesua, a former finance minister's daughter who now curated domestic staff for ultra-high net worth families across Asia. Adesua's reference was a golden ticket, a single paragraph of praise that opened doors money couldn't. When the request came from Korea, a reclusive young heir needing a chef discreet enough for a family reunion, skilled enough to impress, and flexible enough to live on site for a month, Adesua sent only one name. Ifoma arrived at the Kang compound on Jeju with a single suitcase and her own set of knives. The main house was a study in restrained power, low-slung modernist lines of concrete and glass overlooking a private cove. Minyi Kang, 32 years old, met her at the kitchen entrance. He was taller than she expected, with a stillness that felt less like calm and more like containment. He spoke in careful English. The dinner was in 4 days. His father, the patriarch of Kang Maritime, had died 18 months prior. The family had splintered. This meal was his attempt, perhaps his last, to gather them before the next board vote. The menu was to be fusion, he said, honoring Korean tradition but with an international accent. He wanted to surprise them. He needed it to be perfect. He did not tell her about the uncle. Park Jae-hoon was the younger brother of Minyi's late mother. He sat on the board with a 10% stake inherited through his sister, a stake he had leveraged repeatedly to fund ventures that failed with quiet regularity. The latest was a casino project in Vietnam that had collapsed, leaving him with debts that were not just financial. He saw Minyi's succession as a personal insult, a soft-handed academic playing at being a tycoon. He believed the company needed a harder edge, his edge. And he believed the upcoming vote to confirm Minyi as permanent chairman was his last chance to block it and force a deal for his shares at a premium. Ifoma sensed the tension in the house's atmosphere. It was in the way the housekeeper, Mrs. Cho, would fall silent when certain names were mentioned. It was in the stack of legal documents on Minyi's study desk, always growing, never shrinking. She focused on her work. She tested locally sourced abalone with a yaji pepper crust. She perfected a doenjang jollof broth. Her kitchen became a sanctuary of order, each Missy N place a tactical arrangement. 2 nights before the dinner, she was finishing a test run of the pear and pine nut by Banquet dessert when she heard raised voices from the study down the hall. A man's voice, slurred and angry, Minyi's voice, low and firm, then the sound of something shattering glass against stone. Silence. Then the crashing footsteps of someone leaving. Minutes later, Minyi appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked exhausted. He saw the finished dessert on the counter. "It smells safe," he said, a strange compliment. She offered him a plate. He ate it slowly, standing there in his socked feet. "My uncle," he said finally, not looking at her, "he believes tradition is a stone wall. He thinks I am trying to paint a door on it." He put the plate down. "The dinner will be difficult. If he drinks too much, just continue to serve. Do not engage." It was a warning, but it was a warning about words, not about steel. The day of the dinner, the compound transformed. Extravagant flower arrangements appeared. The long, black lacquer table in the dining room was set with celadon and silver. The family arrived in a procession of silent luxury cars. Minnie's aunt, a stern woman in hanbok, two cousins from the corporate office, eyeing everything with analyst coolness, and then Park Jae-hoon. He arrived last, his laughter too loud for the serene space, his hand clamping onto Minnie's shoulder with a grip that whitened his own knuckles. Ifoma worked the pass, coordinating the two temporary servers she'd been assigned. The first courses went out smoothly, a sea urchin and sweet potato custard, a delicate ginger-infused miyeokguk. She watched from the kitchen doorway as the family ate with polite, silent efficiency. The conversation was a minefield of passive aggression, comments about shipping tariffs and board governance wrapped in thin silk. Minnie navigated it like a man walking on frozen lake ice, listening for cracks. The main course was her showpiece, a sous vide hanwoo ribeye with a gochujang demi-glace and a side of her jollof fried rice. She plated the sixth portion herself, the meat a perfect medium rare, the rice a vibrant orange mound. She carried it out on a large service platter, intending to present it at the table's head before serving. As she approached Minnie's seat, Park Jae-hoon was in mid-rant, his face flushed with soju and resentment. And your father would never have let the Pacific route slip for some green energy fantasy. He slammed his hand on the table. The glasses jumped. Minnie, his patience finally snapping, said something quiet lethal. It was a single sentence about accountability and lost millions. Jae-hoon froze, the rage on his face condensed into something pure and horrifyingly simple. He didn't shout. He stood up, picked up the steak knife from his own setting, and lunged across the corner of the table at his nephew. The motion was a blur. The blade aimed for the space between Minnie's collarbone and jaw. Ifoma was already moving. The platter was heavy in her left hand. There was no time to think, only to act. The medic's calculus took over: intercept the trajectory, neutralize the weapon, protect the victim. Her right hand shot out not to grab the wrist, but the blade itself, her fingers closing over the sharp edge just above the guard, her thumb locking against the flat. She used his momentum to arrest the lunge, her body bracing as his weight crashed against her anchored arm. Not a single grain of rice slid from the platter, still held steady in her other hand. The silence was absolute. Every eye was fixed on the impossible image. The chef in her pristine whites, holding a steak knife in midair by its blade, caught like a fly. Park Jae-hoon's drunken rage shattered into confusion, then fear. He let go of the handle, stumbling back. Ifoma didn't move. She held the knife, looking not at the uncle but at Minnie. His face was pale, his eyes wide, locked on her hand. She slowly placed the heavy platter on the table. Only then did she open her fingers, letting the knife clatter onto the polished lacquer. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Her hand began to throb. A thin red line appeared across her palm and fingers. She had caught the edge, not the flat. She closed her fist, hiding the cut. Minnie found his voice, but it wasn't directed at his uncle. He was staring at her, his world reoriented around this new, terrifying fact. "Who are you?" he whispered. But the uncle was already scrambling, his fear curdling into a new, more dangerous emotion: calculation. He pointed a shaking finger not at Minnie but at Ifoma. "She attacked me. This foreigner just attacked a member of this family. I was defending myself." The lie was born in an instant, desperate and clever. He was crafting his alibi, and in that moment, the real weapon wasn't the knife on the table. It was the story he was now telling, and he was aiming it straight at her. In the frozen silence of the dining room, two stories were being written: Park Jae-hoon's, a tale of a deranged foreign attacker, and the truth, witnessed by 7 people who were now deciding whether their loyalty was to family or to fact. Minnie was the first to break the spell. He stood, his chair scraping back. Enough. The word was not loud, but it carried the full weight of his crumbling authority. He looked at his uncle. "You will leave now." But Jae-hoon had found his footing in the lie. He smoothed his suit jacket, a politician's gesture. "I am not the one who needs to leave, she is." He pointed again at Ifoma. "She assaulted me. I demand you call the police, or I will." The threat hung in the air. Calling the police meant scandal, headlines, a board meeting consumed by chaos instead of succession. Minnie's aunt Seo-yeon spoke for the first time, her voice like chilled glass. "There will be no police in this house. Jae-hoon, sit down. You're drunk and you're a fool." But her intervention wasn't for Ifoma's sake. It was damage control for the Kang name. The cousins exchanged glances, already calculating the stock price impact. Ifoma said nothing. She picked up a clean napkin from the service cart and wrapped it around her bleeding hand. The act was methodical, clinical. It screamed of experience. Minyi saw it. Everyone saw it. This was not the reaction of a shocked chef. This was procedure. "My study," Minyi said, his eyes never leaving Ifoma. "Now, both of you," he meant Ifoma and his uncle. The three of them left the dining room, the weight of the family's stare pushing them out. In the stark, modern study, Minyi stood behind his father's old desk. "Explain," he said, the single word aimed at Ifoma. Park Jae-hoon began his performance again, embellishing details, claiming Ifoma had brandished the knife first. Minyi held up a hand, silencing him. He was still looking at Ifoma. "You caught a moving blade, bare-handed, without dropping a plate. Who does that?" Ifoma met his gaze. The medic in her was doing a threat assessment. The employer was now an unknown variable. "I was a soldier," she said, the truth stripped of context. It was a test. "A soldier," Minyi repeated. "You are a chef from Lagos." "I was a combat medic in the Nigerian army for 5 years. I was honorably discharged. I retrained as a chef. The reference from Adesua is real. My skills in the kitchen are real. What happened out there," she glanced at her wrapped hand, "that was a reflex from a different life." Park Jae-hoon seized on it. "A soldier, you see, violent by training. She came here under false pretenses." "I came here to cook," Ifoma said, her voice low but diamond hard. "He," she nodded at Jae-hoon, "lunged with a knife. I stopped him. The cut on my palm is from the edge of the blade I caught. If I had attacked him, as he claims, the wound would be on his body, not mine. The forensics are simple." Minyi's mind was racing, connecting dots. The stillness he'd mistaken for shyness was tactical awareness. The precision in her kitchen was field discipline. Her calm now was not the absence of fear, but the management of it. He believed her, completely, and that belief created a monumental problem. To side with her was to accuse his uncle of attempted murder and perjury in front of the entire family. It was a war he wasn't sure he could win. "You will both stay in the guest wings tonight," Minyi decreed, playing for time. "No one leaves the compound. We will resolve this internally in the morning." But Park Jae-hoon had no intention of waiting. By dawn, his version of events was already seeding its way through the company's old guard network. A whispered narrative, Minyi, unstable and influenced by a dangerous foreign element, was allowing violence against family. The board vote, just days away, was now under threat. Minyi spent the night not sleeping, but investigating. He had his security chief pull the compound's external camera feeds. They showed nothing of the dining room, but they showed Park Jae-hoon's car arriving and the man himself stumbling slightly on his way to the door, drunk before he even entered. He had Adesua, the agent in Lagos, woken up with a call. He demanded the full, unvarnished background on Ifoma Enwasu. Adesua, protective of her reputation, but more protective of the truth, confirmed it all. She even emailed scanned documents, honorable discharge papers, a commendation for bravery under fire from a Nigerian army colonel, a photo of a younger, thinner Ifoma in fatigues, her eyes older than her face. "She saved lives," Adesua wrote. "She is not a person who takes a life lightly. If she acted violently, someone else made it necessary." Armed with this, Minyi went to his aunt Seo-yeon at first light. He needed an ally. In her sunroom, overlooking the misty garden, he laid out the camera time stamps, the military records. "Jae-hoon is lying. He tried to kill me. Ifoma stopped him. We have a debt to her, not a grievance." Seo-yeon sipped her tea, her face unreadable. "You show me proof of her past, but not of his intent. The knife had only his fingerprints, you say? Of course it did. He picked it up from his own setting. You have a credible witness, a soldier against a Kang family board member. This is not a court of law, Minyi. It is a court of perception. And in that court, he is a respected, if flawed, uncle. She is a foreign employee with a violent profession in her history. Who do you think the board, the press, will believe? So we let him win. He gets away with it." "He doesn't get away with anything," Seo-yeon said. "He gets managed. You quietly buy out his shares at a premium to make his debt problem disappear. He resigns from the board for health reasons. The chef is paid a significant settlement, signs an NDA, and leaves the country. The dinner incident becomes a family misunderstanding, a story no one tells. The company remains stable. You become chairman. This is how it is done. It was the tidy, bloodless solution, the corporate fix. It made perfect, horrible sense. Minyi felt sick. And the truth. The truth is what we agree it is, his aunt said. The truth is what keeps Kang Maritime sailing. Minyi left her, his resolve crumbling. He walked the path to the guest wing where Ifoma was being kept, not as a guest, but as a potential liability. He found her on the small patio, her hand freshly bandaged, looking out at the sea. She didn't turn. They want me to pay you off and send you home, he said flatly. She was silent for a long moment. I know. He was startled. How? Your aunt's assistant brought me a draft agreement an hour ago. A very large number. A first-class ticket to Lagos. A non-disclosure document thicker than my passport. Minyi felt a surge of shame. I didn't authorize that. Doesn't matter, the machine is moving. She finally turned. Her face was calm, but her eyes were the ones from the military photo, resigned to a harsh reality. They explained the alternative. If I refuse, if I insist on my story, they will support your uncle's version to the police. My visa will be revoked. My past as a soldier will be framed as psychologically unstable. I will be deported, probably blacklisted. Adesua's agency will be ruined. I will have nothing, and you will still lose your vote because the scandal will taint you. The number in the agreement, it is not payment for my silence. It is the price of my future. They are buying it from me. Minyi felt the walls of his inherited world closing in. The system was designed to smooth over chaos, to commodify justice. What do you want to do? He asked, the question feeling pathetic. Foma looked at him, and for the first time he saw a flicker of the anger she must have felt in the dining room. I want, she said slowly, to not have my life's narrative rewritten by a drunk man with debt. I want the fact that I saved your life to be a fact, not a secret. But I am not a fool. I have seen how power works. In my country, in yours, it protects its own. She looked back at the sea. I will sign their paper, but not for their money, for one condition. Name it. You look at the security footage from inside the house, not just the exteriors. You told me the system was upgraded last year. There are sensors in every room, including the dining room, motion-activated, audio-capable, for climate and security optimization. You may not have a video, but you have a data log. A log that would show the exact decibel spike of a shout, the vibration signature of a hand hitting a table, the precise location of movement at the time of the incident. Your uncle's story is a story, data is not. Before I sign away my truth, I want you to look at your own data. I want you to know for yourself what happened, then you can bury it. It was a devastating request. It forced him to seek proof he was already preparing to ignore. He nodded, a tight jerk of his head. I'll have the system logs pulled. But the system, he discovered an hour later, had experienced a localized firmware error at exactly 9:42 p.m., the time of the incident. The data from the dining room sensors for a 15-minute window was corrupted, unrecoverable. His head of security, a man who reported to the board's audit committee, shrugged apologetically. These glitches happen, sir. Very unfortunate timing. Minyi stood in the secure server room, the cool air blowing on his neck. A glitch, a convenient, untraceable digital silence where the truth had been. It was not proof of his uncle's guilt, but it was proof of something else, that forces within his own company were already at work to erase the incident. Someone had accessed the system. Someone had made sure there would be no data to contradict the chosen story. He went back to Ifoma, the weight of this new discovery like a stone in his gut. The data is gone, he said. She absorbed this without surprise. Then we are done. She picked up the pen next to the unsigned agreement. Wait, the word burst out of him. He thought of his father, a man who built an empire on logistics, on the reliable movement of truth from point A to point B. He thought of the knife in the air, the unwavering steadiness of her hand. If I give you a different choice, a dangerous one, would you take it? Ifoma put the pen down. What choice? Help me prove it, not with lost data, with him. Park Jae-hoon is a liar, but he's not a mastermind. He's desperate. He's connected to bad people because of his debts. If he was willing to try killing me in a room full of people, what else is he capable of? What did he do to get so desperate? Minyi's mind was clicking into a new dangerous gear. The corporate play was over. This was now a fight. I need to trace his money. I need to find the pressure point. And to do that, I need to go outside the company, outside the family. You need an investigator, Ifoma said. I need someone who can see a threat coming, who can assess a situation under pressure, who can't be easily intimidated. He looked at her bandaged hand. I need the soldier, not the chef. Ifoma stared at him, seeing the final, fragile bridge he was offering. To step onto it was to burn her settlement, her safe exit. To step onto it was to ally herself with a man who might still fail, against a system that had already shown its teeth. She thought of her sergeant's voice. Assess, don't react. She assessed the man in front of her, scared, out of his depth, but finally choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. The first thing you do, she said, her voice shifting into something flat and instructional, is stop using the company network for anything related to this. The second thing you do is get me a burner phone. The third thing, you tell me everything you know about your uncle's casino project in Vietnam, because that's where this started, and that's where we'll find the crack. Minyi felt a surge of something he hadn't felt since before his father died, momentum, but as he turned to leave, his personal phone buzzed. A message from the board secretary. The emergency meeting to discuss recent destabilizing events had been moved up. It was now in 24 hours. The vote on his chairmanship was off the agenda. The only item listed was leadership continuity. The walls were not just closing in, they were voting on it. 24 hours before the board would decide his fate, Minyi Kang realized he was no longer investigating a drunken assault. He was excavating a grave, and the body in it was the truth about his father's death. He met Ifoma in a private tea room at a secluded coastal hotel, paid for with cash from a safe he'd emptied in his study. She had changed out of her chef's whites into dark jeans and a black sweater. She looked like what she was, an operator. Between them, on a low table, lay the burner phone and a printout of the board secretary's message. Leadership continuity means they're selecting your replacement, Ifoma said, her tone analytical. Your uncle has the votes. He has the 10% needed to force a motion. My aunt, I thought she was neutral, but her priority is stability. If she believes I am the instability, she will side with him to install a caretaker CEO, probably Choi, the chief financial officer, a man who reports to the audit committee, the same committee that oversees security. The same people who erased your sensor data, Ifoma finished. This is a coordinated move. It's not just your uncle lashing out. It's a coup. The word hung in the air, making the conspiracy real. Minyi felt a cold clarity wash over him. The Vietnam casino project. Jae-hoon needed money. Who did he borrow from? Using the burner phone, Minyi called his only remaining loyalist inside the company, a young woman in the mergers and acquisitions department named Soo-jin. She was brilliant, owed her scholarship to his father, and had been sidelined by the old guard. He asked her to access the secured corporate intelligence server to pull any due diligence reports on the Golden Dragon Casino Consortium in Da Nang. 30 minutes later, she called back, her voice tight with fear. The reports are gone, Minyi SSI, not archived, deleted from the primary and backup logs, but I found a fragment in the sent items of a former analyst's email. He was fired last year. He sent a partial list to his personal account the day before he was let go. She read it out. The consortium was a shell. Its registered owners were a holding company in Macau, which was itself a front for a Chinese triad syndicate specializing in narcotics and arms trafficking across the South China Sea. The syndicate had a name, the White Jade Dragon. Park Jae-hoon hadn't just borrowed from a bank. He'd taken money from one of the most vicious criminal organizations in the region. How much? Minyi asked, his mouth dry. The fragment mentions a figure, 20 million US dollars, unsecured, with a weekly vigorish of 2%. Minyi did the math. The interest alone was $400,000 a week. Jae-hoon had been paying that somehow for months, but with the casino project dead, the capital was gone. He was drowning. What's the collateral on an unsecured loan from people like that? Soo-jin's voice dropped to a whisper. The fragment has a note from the analyst. It says, collateral speculated to be operational influence within Kang maritime shipping lanes, specifically port priority and customs clearance in Busan and Incheon. Minyi's blood turned to ice. His uncle hadn't just gambled with money. He offered the family company's logistics network as a playground for smugglers. The board couldn't know. If they did, the company would be destroyed by regulators and sanctions. Ifoma had been listening on speaker. She spoke now. They don't want their money back. They want the port access. Your uncle failed to deliver the casino, which was their legitimate cover. Now they want their pound of flesh directly from your shipping empire. They're backing his play for the chairman's seat because he's their puppet. He gets the company, they get the ports. It all made a horrific, logical sense. The failed project, the desperate debt, the sudden boldness of the assassination attempt. Jae-hoon wasn't just trying to win a board vote. He was trying to save his life from his creditors by handing them the keys to the kingdom. And the glitch in the security system, the moved board meeting, it wasn't just corporate politics. The syndicate had tentacles inside the company, ensuring their investment was protected. Minyi ended the call, thanking Soo-jin and telling her to go home and stay off the grid. He looked at Ifoma, despair creeping in. This is too big. It's not a family dispute. It's an international criminal infiltration. I can't fight this with a burner phone and a retired medic. Foma leaned forward. You fight it the same way you fight anything. You find the weak point. The syndicate needs your uncle to win. Without him, they have no inside man. Their leverage over him is the debt. Our leverage over him is the truth about the debt. We need to make him more afraid of us than he is of them. How? He's already tried to kill me. Then we don't confront him. We go around him. We find the evidence he thinks is buried. You said your father died 18 months ago. A sudden heart attack while playing golf in Jeju. Minyi nodded, the old grief a sharp ache. He was healthy, it was shocking. Was there an autopsy? Yes, it confirmed a massive coronary. Why? Foma's eyes were like flint. In my former work, I saw many heart attacks. I also saw poisonings designed to mimic them. Certain toxins, derived from plants, leave almost no trace after 72 hours. They accelerate heart rate to the point of arrest. If your uncle was dealing with a syndicate 18 months ago, if he needed control of the company even then, your father was the obstacle, not you. Minyi felt the room tilt. The idea was monstrous, unthinkable. You're saying my father was murdered. I'm saying a man who tries to stab his nephew in front of witnesses is capable of anything. I'm saying his financial problems didn't start with Vietnam. They started before. The casino was his gamble to get out of a hole he was already in. We need to exhume your father's body. The sentence landed like a physical blow. Minyi recoiled. I cannot, that is. It is the only way to prove a conspiracy deeper than a dinner knife, Ifoma said, her voice relentlessly calm. If we can prove your father was murdered and link it to Jae-hoon's syndicate ties, the board will not just dismiss you. They will rally to you to save the company from total ruin. It turns your uncle from a rival into a cancer they need to cut out. It was a nuclear option. It violated every tradition, every filial piety. The scandal would be unimaginable. But as Minyi sat there, the pieces locked together with a sickening finality. His father's resistance to Jae-hoon's new ventures. The sudden, convenient death. The smooth transition of power that left Jae-hoon's board position strengthened. The rapid approval of the Vietnam investment by the new grieving board. We need a forensic pathologist, a private one, and we need to do it tonight, before the board meeting, before anyone knows we're looking, he said, the decision solidifying in his gut. Ifoma nodded. I have a contact, a doctor who used to work with military intelligence. He is discreet, but it will cost, and it will be dangerous. If we're wrong, you desecrate your father's grave for nothing. If we're right, the people who killed him will know we know the moment we step into that crypt. Minyi's phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. It contained a single photograph taken from a long lens. It showed Soo-jin, the M&A analyst, sitting in her car outside her apartment building. The timestamp was 10 minutes ago. Below the photo was a line of text in Korean, tell your curious friend to stop digging. The past is buried for a reason. The meeting tomorrow is a formality. Accept the transition gracefully. or her next photo will not be so peaceful. The threat was explicit. They were watching. They had his people. Ifoma saw the color drain from his face. She read the message. They've made their move. We are out of time for quiet digging. Minyi's hands trembled with rage. They were threatening a young woman who had only tried to help. The tidy corporate coup was gone, stripped away to reveal the brutal threat underneath. What do we do? Ifoma took the phone from his hand and powered it off, removing the battery. We do not negotiate, we escalate. They think we will run or fold, so we walk right into the heart of it. We go to the board meeting, but we don't go with lawyers, we go with a warhead. What warhead? We have no proof of anything. We have the one thing they can't control, Ifoma said, a fierce, determined light in her eyes. We have a witness they never accounted for. Me, I am the inconvenient fact, the soldier who saw the knife, the foreigner who doesn't understand the rules of their game. You will bring me to the board meeting as your security consultant, and I will tell them a story, not about a knife, about a syndicate called the White Jade Dragon and the puppet they've installed in their midst. I will name names. I will describe the debt. I will dare them to check the port logs for anomalies. I will turn their orderly coup into a public, messy, screaming scandal right there in the boardroom. It's a bluff, but they can't risk calling it, not if they want to keep their ports clean. It was a desperate, audacious plan. It relied entirely on the sheer, disruptive force of her testimony and the board's fear of exposure. If one person in that room was already in the syndicate's pocket, it would fail. If they called her bluff and had her arrested on the spot, it would fail. Minyi looked at her, this woman who had arrived to make rice and was now preparing to go to war for him. Why are you doing this? You could still take the money and disappear. Ifoma was quiet for a moment. My sergeant once told me that evil preys on the silence of good people. Your uncle and his friends, they are predators. They count on silence, on tidy solutions. They think everyone has a price. I want to show them someone who doesn't. She paused. And you asked for the soldier, so here I am. The clock was ticking. The board meeting was at 9 a.m. They had one night to prepare their ambush. Minyi knew that by walking into that room with Ifoma, he was burning every last bridge. There would be no peaceful transfer, no graceful exit. It would be victory or annihilation. As they left the tea room, headed for a safe house Sujin had once used, Minyi realized the final, terrifying truth. The battle for his company was over. Tomorrow wasn't about business. It was about survival. And his only ally was a chef with a fighter's hands, walking with him into the dragon's den. At 8:55 a.m., Minyi Kang walked into the 32nd floor boardroom of Kang Maritime, a room designed for orderly consensus. By his side, in a simple black suit that was not a uniform but felt like one, was Ifoma. They were not there to negotiate. They were there to detonate. The room was a semicircle of power. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the port of Busan, the family's empire laid out in cranes and container ships. At the center of the curved table sat his aunt, Seo Yeon, presiding. To her right, Park Jae-hoon looking pale but smug. To her left, Chief Financial Officer Choi, the proposed caretaker CEO. The other 10 board members, a mix of family and lifetime executives, watched Minyi's entrance with a mixture of pity and impatience. Seo Yeon did not smile. This meeting is for board members only, Minyi. Your guest will wait outside. My guest is a material witness to the agenda item, Minyi said, his voice carrying in the silent room. Her name is Ifoma Nwasu. She is here under my authority as interim chairman. Park Jae-hoon scoffed. This is the violent woman who assaulted me. This is an outrage. The only outrage, Minyi said, locking eyes with his uncle, is that you are sitting in this room and not in a police interrogation room for attempted murder and conspiracy with a transnational criminal syndicate. The room erupted, gasps, chairs scraping. Seo Yeon hammered a gavel. You will not make wild, unsubstantiated accusations in this chamber. They are substantiated. Minyi nodded to Ifoma. Ifoma stepped forward. She did not approach the table. She stood her ground, a soldier reporting. Her voice was clear, calm, and carried the weight of irrefutable fact. My name is Ifoma Nwasu. I'm a former combat medic of the Nigerian army. I was hired as a private chef for the Kang family reunion on Jeju. On the night of the dinner, I witnessed Park Jae-hoon attempt to stab Minyi Kang with a steak knife. I intercepted the blade. My hand was cut by the edge, which forensics will confirm matches a defensive catch, not an offensive strike. She held up her bandaged hand. That is the simple truth of the physical event. The complex truth is why he did it. She turned her gaze to the board. Park Jae-hoon is indebted to a syndicate known as the White Jade Dragon to the tune of $20 million with weekly interest of 400,000. The debt stems from a failed casino project in Vietnam, a project he pushed through this board while hiding the true nature of the investors. The syndicate's collateral for this loan was not money. It was operational influence within Kang Maritime's shipping lanes at Busan and Incheon. They are not debt collectors. They are a narcotics and arms trafficking organization seeking a port of entry. They are backing Park Jae-hoon's play for this chair because he is their puppet. If he wins, this company becomes a smuggling front. The silence was absolute, stunned. CFO Choi was the first to recover. Preposterous. This is a desperate fiction. You have proof of these fantasy stories. Min-yi spoke. The due diligence reports on the Golden Dragon Casino Consortium were deleted from our servers. I have a fragment recovered by a loyal employee naming the White Jade Dragon. I have the wire transfer records from Jae-hoon's shell company to accounts in Macau, which my personal forensic accountant obtained last night. And I have something else. He looked at his aunt. I have a question. Why was an emergency board meeting called to discuss leadership continuity the morning after an internal family incident, before any investigation could occur? Who moved the meeting, and who ordered the deletion of the security sensor data from the dining room at the exact time of the attack? All eyes turned to CFO Choi. He adjusted his glasses, a nervous tick. Standard protocol. The incident represented a security and reputational risk. The data corruption was unfortunate. Wasn't corruption, a new voice said from the doorway. Sujin, the M&A analyst, walked in, her face pale but determined. She carried a tablet. I'm sorry for the intrusion, Madame Chair, but I was the one who found the fragment. And after I was threatened last night, I did more digging. The command to delete the dining room sensor logs was initiated from the terminal in CFO Choi's private office. At 8:52 p.m., the incident occurred at 9:42. The logs were erased an hour before the knife was ever picked up. The revelation was a seismic shock. Choi had erased evidence before the crime even happened. It meant he was not just covering up, he was part of the plot. He knew an incident would occur and prepared to hide it. Park Jae-hoon was on his feet, pointing at Choi. He made me do it. The syndicate, they own him. He said if I didn't take out Min-yi, they'd kill me and my family. The debt, it was his introduction. Chaos exploded, shouting, accusations. Seo Yeon's gavel was useless. In the tumult, Min-yi saw his aunt's face. It was not shocked, it was granite. She had known, not all of it, but enough. She had chosen stability, even if that stability was built on a foundation of crime. Min-yi walked to the head of the table and placed his hands on the surface, leaning forward. Enough. The authority in his voice, his father's voice, cut through the noise. This ends now. Aunt, you will call the National Police Agency's Organized Crime Unit. You will surrender all internal logs and records. Jae-hoon, you will be detained until they arrive. Choi, you will resign immediately and cooperate if you want any hope of leniency. He looked at the rest of the board. The vote on my chairmanship is now. Those in favor of my continued leadership and of purging this corruption from our company, raise your hands. One by one, then all at once, hands rose. Even the hesitant ones, seeing the ship turning, chose the new captain over the mutineers. Seo Yeon was the last. She looked at her nephew, seeing the ghost of her brother in his resolute stance. She did not raise her hand, but she gave a single, slow nod. The gavel fell from her fingers. It was over. The aftermath was a blur of police, statements, and controlled corporate messaging. Park Jae-hoon and CFO Choi were taken into custody. The syndicate, alerted, would scatter, but the damage to their pipeline was done. Kang Maritime would face audits and scrutiny, but with Min-yi at the helm, cooperating fully, it would survive. A week later, the compound on Jeju was quiet. Min-yi found Ifoma in the kitchen, not cooking, but packing her knives into their roll. You're leaving, he said. My work is done. The board confirmed you as permanent chairman. The police have my statement. My visa is still valid. It's time. I offered you a position, head of corporate security, a real title, a real salary. She smiled, a small, tired thing. I am a chef, Minyi, or I was. I'm not sure what I am now, but I know I am not a security executive. That is not my life. He leaned against the counter, watching her. Then what is? I don't know, but I need to find it somewhere the air doesn't taste of conspiracy and salt. She closed the knife roll. The money your aunt offered, the settlement, is it still available? Minyi frowned. After what you did, you can name your price. I don't want a price, I want the exact amount, and I want it wired to an account in Lagos for a foundation my grandmother's church runs, a clinic for people with disabilities, for women who can't walk. They need a new van and some equipment. That's what the money is for. He was stunned. That's all. That's everything, she said. She picked up her suitcase. At the door, she paused. You'll be a good chairman. You learn the most important lesson. Sometimes you have to break the table to save the house. He walked her to the car that would take her to the airport. As she got in, he said, "Will I see you again?" Ifoma looked at him through the open window. "Maybe, on a Tuesday, if you're ever in Lagos, ask for the best jollof rice in Victoria Island. They'll tell you where to find me." The car pulled away. Minyi stood watching until it disappeared. He felt the emptiness of the compound, but also its lightness. The poison was gone. 2 days later, a package arrived at his office. No return address. Inside was a single framed photograph. It was a picture of the dining room table, taken from an angle he didn't recognize. It showed the exact moment, the blur of the knife in the air, his own frozen face, and Ifoma's hand, a clear, sharp image of her fingers closing around the blade. On the back, in neat handwriting, was a note, "For your records." The sensor data was corrupted, but the backup analog camera in the antique clock was not. Sometimes the old ways see what the new ways try to hide. It was signed with his aunt's initial. She had the proof all along. She had let him fight his own battle, but she had given him the weapon to win it. At the exact moment he proved he was worthy. It was her apology and her blessing. Minyi placed the photograph on his desk. That evening he did not work. He drove to the family cemetery on the hillside. He stood before his father's grave, the exhumation order now unnecessary. He told him everything. About the knife, the syndicate, the betrayal, and the chef who caught it all. He told him about the photograph his aunt had taken. The wind off the sea was cold, but for the first time in 18 months, Minyi did not feel alone. Back at the compound, he instructed Mrs. Cho to prepare the dining room for one. He sat at the head of the long table where the knife had flown. He ate a simple meal. The room was silent, but the silence was no longer oppressive. It was peaceful. He knew the road ahead would be hard, rebuilding trust, securing the company, but he had faced the dragon in its den and won. And somewhere over the Pacific, a woman with hands strong enough to stop a blade was flying home, her own battle finally over, her future unwritten, but clean. The story that began with a flash of steel ended not with a clash, but with a choice, to remember, to rebuild, and to never again mistake silence for peace. So what is the true story of the night the chef caught the knife? On the surface, it's a sensational tale of a single impossible moment, a flash of steel, a hand moving faster than thought, a dinner party turned into a crime scene, but pull back the lens and you'll see it's a story about facades. The facade of a wealthy, powerful family crumbling under the weight of its own secrets. The facade of a quiet, efficient employee behind which lived a soldier's resolve. The facade of corporate order masking a viral corruption. Minyi Kang learned that the greatest threat to his empire wasn't a market crash or a rival company. It was the unexamined loyalty, the quiet compromise, the debt left to fester in the dark. He was saved not by a boardroom maneuver, but by a rupture, by a truth so violent and undeniable it shattered every polite fiction in the room. Ifoma Nwasu learned that the hands trained to heal in one world could be forced to defend in another, that her past wasn't a shadow to hide, but a spine to stand on. She entered that house to perform a service, but she remained to fulfill a purpose, to be the inconvenient fact that a house of lies could not accommodate. And the Kang family learned that some silences are complicity, that the aunt, Seo-yeon, holding the photograph all along, was the most complex character of all, a protector of the family legacy who had to let it nearly break to see it become strong again. Her final gift was not the picture, but the test. She made her nephew prove he was worth saving. These stories are everywhere. In the quiet employee with a history you'd never guess. In the polished family dynasty rotting from within. In the moment a person is forced to decide, do I follow the rules or do I do what is right? Ifoma went back to Lagos. The clinic got its van. Minyi rebuilt Kang Maritime with a transparency that became its new armor. They do not speak. But on Tuesday nights, Minyi sometimes orders jollof rice from a new restaurant in Seoul, run by a Nigerian chef who learned from a friend of a friend. It's never quite the same, but it reminds him. We are all surrounded by unseen battles, by quiet courage, by secrets waiting for their moment to crack the surface. The question isn't whether you'll face a knife. The question is what hands you've trained for the catch and what truth you're willing to hold when everything else is falling. If you found yourself in this story, if you saw a piece of your own hidden battles in theirs, then you understand the stakes. For more deep dives into the shadows behind the spotlight, into the true stories of courage hiding in plain sight, make sure to subscribe. The next story is already waiting.